What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Week 17 DFS MVP. I'm your host, TJ Hernandez, the director of DFS at 4for4.com, as always, with my trusty co-host, Mr. John Daigle. Daigle, we got through Christmas. We are up against New Year's. We're just talking about how it's the foggy week for everybody. So how are we feeling about this week?
Everyone, including us, the world shut down in this 1 week between Christmas and New Year's Eve. And yet there is football still happening. Championship games sit still coming in, still happening. So it's been the weirdest week I can recall in some time. And it's definitely all because Christmas, it was a weird calendar year where it fell on a Saturday.
Yeah, the combination of like a main slate on a Saturday and then 2-3 game slates the last 2 weeks, I'm all out of sorts. But I think I could rein it in for another 48 hours, and hopefully we end our New Year's festivities in time to submit lineups. We'll see how that goes. But for now, we have prepped properly to get us to that point. Before we get into everything, reminder that the DFS price at 4for4 has dropped down to $14. It's our final price drop of the season. I know it's really late in the season, but if you are playing DFS and you want to play through Super Bowl, we have content projections and tools that go through Super Bowl. And in the playoffs, there's not really a true main slate. Like, they name a main slate, but there's a ton of slates play in playoffs. So there's still a ton of value on that $14, less than a milli maker buy-in to get access to everything, and hopefully a sneak preview for your 2023 sub. But as we always do, decision point of the week. I think there's probably a couple things that we're going to be swinging our decisions on, but what is the one big thing that you're looking at this week going into the main slate?
Honestly, just how we get unique and how we play Lions Bears, because that game in particular, getting steamed for all the right reasons. 4 points higher than the next closest total on the main slate. The Lions team total is higher than the Chiefs. They now have the highest team total on the entire board. And really, it's just the one that you can imagine both sides pushing back here. I would love to show up, honestly, and talk about Aaron Rodgers and the Packers and Vikings. And I do think that game is great for skinny stacking. Maybe you can squeeze Kirk Cousins in. But even we saw it on Sunday slate. How many times do we have to pretend Aaron Rodgers can do something that he's just not doing this year? He hasn't reached 300 yards in the game. For that total and both team totals to continue increasing throughout the week leading up to Sunday morning, and for Rodgers to only have 238 and a touchdown. Against the Titans, he only had 227 and 2 touchdowns. So I just don't think he has a ceiling for me to care, and thus my pull for this slate is, at quarterback at least, is significantly shorter. And so I just look at that game and say, okay, have to play someone here, I think. And how do I do it, knowing I still want to have pieces of this game and not fade it entirely in any build?
Yeah, there's definitely some salary considerations, but I think there's so many salary combos this week that I don't know if there's just one big salary-based decision. So I do agree with you. It's how much do we go all in on this Lions and Bears game? Is it a spot that we can be onslaughting? The thing that makes me a little nervous about onslaughts this week, I don't think you're onslaughting any other game besides that game, but is just the fact that we've been playing these 10-game slates for what it feels like is months. It's really just been weeks, but shorter slates. We have a 13-game slate now, and a lot of those games are sneaky good spots. So when the slates are that big, it's a little bit harder on a main slate to onslaught a game, and even if it gets there, be perfect enough, especially in large field stuff, because there's so many opportunities for players to hit really perfectly compared to even just 3 fewer games with 10 games. So I'm kind of trying to think through that. And I mean, if we look at the spots, I mean, Chiefs only have half a point team total below the Lions, and they're way less popular, obviously way more expensive, harder to stack. But that also means you are more likely to hit perfect on the Chiefs than you are the Lions, and you're paying for that. Niners are in a really good spot against a Raiders defense that's in shambles. You mentioned the Green Bay Vikings game. I think the LA game, Rams Chargers. I think there's some sneaky Chargers upside over there. A lot of people are going to be playing the Falcons, cheap Falcons players. Eagles. I think there's a lot of good spots this week. I obviously haven't like built and definitely not locked yet, but I think I'm leaning towards not onslaughting that game.
That's a good point about 13 game slate, because we are coming off back-to-back weeks of 10 games, which has made our decisions tougher with less options, especially given weather. Yeah, and I think there are holes to poke in a lot of the team totals. Even like Chiefs Broncos, I don't necessarily think there is a single good option to run any Patrick Mahomes stacks back with. Jerry Jeudy would be the one, of course, who continues getting it done weekly. But even in losing Greg Dulcich, like maybe everyone gets to Albert O at stone minimum all of a sudden. So that might be an option. The 49ers, gosh, I wonder if there's even need for Christian McCaffrey to play more than a half in that game. With Jared Stidham now under center. And Josh McDaniel also said that they want to use these next 2 games to take a step back for veterans to evaluate the team. And so we don't even know like what the usage will be for Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs this week.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm not touching any Raiders. That's crazy talk. I'm actually glad you brought that up, because there is one game that that is kind of looming, and it's the Jaguars Texans. And the Jaguars have came out and said they're playing to win. They're playing all of their starters, but this game is literally meaningless. Next week, again, we saw it with the Titans last night on Thursday Night Football. That game decides the division no matter what happens in this Jaguars-Texans game. So, I mean, are we factoring that into, because Jaguars are going to be pretty popular this week, are we factoring that into our decision at all? Should we give them, I guess the projections are going to be the projections, but maybe a slightly grade down in tournaments because maybe their floor is lower than we think? Or do you trust them?
You say they're going to be popular. I actually don't think they'll be popular, because I think
they won't be as popular as the Lions.
Sure, yeah. Because I think everyone is taking that notion that they may get rested. But remember, like the Jaguars still can win this week, lose next week, and make the wild card. It's a very long shot. I believe the number is 6 to 9% chance. I've talked about this on other shows as well, but there is that chance. So they do actually not necessarily need to, but they are playing to win this game. And so I've always thought the notion that they're just going to bench players has always just been misplaced with everyone talking about it this week. So I do think like Travis Etienne's pretty sneaky. Evan Engram, I actually don't know if he's going to be high rostered on DraftKings, because he's falling in that weird salary zone. The Pat Freiermuth zone is what I call it, where it's like not low enough to be minimum and not high enough to reach George Kittle. And everyone forgets about 4,500. So like Engram, I think, is actually a tremendous play that I don't think will be as rostered as he should be. So there are key pieces like that here. Brandon Cooks is the one who's going to get steamed no matter what, because he's too cheap for a player who just had, 70% of his team's targets.
Yeah. If, I haven't projected kind of high the Jaguars, but if I bump that down a little bit, or if I see across the industry that I think you should high on their ownership projection, then I might end up liking them a lot more than I do right now.
Yeah, that's one. That's another key matchup. Yes.
All right, that's interesting. As we have done every week, getting ready for a little supplement to DFS, we've been tailing our betting gurus over at 4for4. Make sure you're checking out all the content they're putting over there and kind of helping us guide our Underdog card builder segment. Every week we throw a couple plays out on Underdog. Hopefully you guys tail them and get yourself an opportunity to get a free 4for4 DFS subscription when you use the promo code 4for4. Let's bring that up and see if there's any plays we like. I got a couple plays that I think are like, I think the lines are really soft, but do you have any you want me to look up before we get into those?
No, let's go ahead and go with what you pulled from the Discord. And then also quickly, I will say that getting the subs on sale right now, like basically if you can get a sub and then you get in the Discord, and you, TJ, you already talked about at the top of the show how discounted all subs are. Like right now, Ryan Noonan, him and Connor Allen, who were stealing these props from the Discord, Ryan Noonan is basically, nothing's guaranteed, I understand that, but he's like locking in you getting your money back if you get a sub now, because he's literally 71% the last month on tackle props because he created a model.
Yeah, we need to get those on Underdog.
He created a model. I've seen it. And I genuinely think he's the only person in the country, I'm not kidding, the only person in the country projecting tackles. And he's doing this by like understanding who is keeping score at each stadium for tackles because they give like an extra bump and assist at certain plate locations around the country. So I'm just saying, if you get the sub now and they are super cheap, that gives you access to the Discord where Noonan gives these tackle props away. And I'm pretty sure he can get you your money back. Like, I don't want to speak for him, but he's doing so well right now that it's the time to get in.
Yeah, that's probably the best plug for our betting
It's
subscription
amazing
right now.
He's
because
such a virgin. It's unbelievable.
We've been the tackle prop joke has been going off in the 4for4 slacks and discords, but they've been hitting like crazy. But we don't have tackle props here. So the one that I that really popped to me, I'm going off rogue off Noonan and Connor Allen this week. But I mean, Jamal Williams at 49.5 rushing yards seems really high. I know that game is supposed to have a lot of fireworks, but we saw DeAndre Swift have his highest snap share of the season last week. I know they were down by a lot. Jamal hasn't gone over 37 in 5 weeks. And there's just lots of ways to attack the Bears. I actually think it sets up more as a Swift game, and then obviously all the pass catchers can really get there. And then they have Jared Goff's passing yardage prop all the way up at 281, which is a high prop. So if we think that they're going to do that much damage through the air, I have a hard time seeing Jamal getting to 50 without obviously breaking one. But I mean, am I off on thinking that that's a pretty high prop for what we've seen out of Jamal these last few weeks?
It is a high number. I agree. I still think I will play him wherever I do not play Jared Goff as leverage because he still has 3 touchdowns in his range of outcomes. But yes, I do understand that he's not necessarily a player we're expecting to explode.
He also has 3 touchdowns on 20 yards in his range of outcomes, right?
Definitely. He's Steven Davis, and I think I just dated myself.
That's a throwback reference. All right, good. I'm glad you liked that one. The other one that I like that really stood out to me is Brandon Ayuk, 53.5 receiving yards. I like that. I talked about this Raiders game, that they are basically a team that you can attack any which way. One of 3 teams that are bottom 10 in schedule adjusted points to both quarterbacks and running backs, and they're also bottom half of the league against wide receivers. Over the last couple of weeks with Purdy, and Ayuk has tied for the team lead in target share, leads the team by a lot in air yard share. And we almost saw him get there with a huge game last week, got tackled inside the 5-yard line. So Ayuk, I mean, he's probably not going to get you 9 catches for 90 yards, but I think 4 catches and breaking one of those off in this game. I like Ayuk a lot this week.
I like it a lot as well. Ayuk was in my skinny stacks last week, as we talked about, and he didn't scorch the earth with 84 receiving yards, but got there enough on DraftKings with the receptions. And as we are seeing, like Brock Purdy still engineering this offense quite successfully.
Yeah. Is there a third leg you want me to throw in there, or are we rolling with 2 this week?
I think we are rolling with 2 this week. How did we do last week?
We whiffed pretty hard last week, but okay. we'll get there.
but we don't talk about it. So yes, no. Let's roll with 2 again. We were trying to get off the snide here.
All right. As always, if you are watching and you want to tail those, get those in as soon as possible because these lines do change pretty quickly. If you're listening, we post the picture on Twitter after. And hopefully they are still up if you can get them. But as always, if you're just a listener, you can always check the Twitter around this time of the day on Friday, and they'll be up as soon as possible. Let's go on to the best part of the show, what everybody's here for, the DFS plays of the week, our top values, our favorite plays at every single position. And we're just starting off with a bang. We're both talking about quarterbacks in the biggest game of the week, which should be the most fantasy friendly game of the week. Tell me what side you're talking about here.
Justin Fields is projecting with the highest ceiling of any quarterback, Patrick Mahomes included, on this slate. And so that's where we start here. Everyone will likely try to go down for Jared Goff, and I absolutely support Jared Goff and his ceiling in this environment. But at the same time, we get recency bias effect for projecting Fields for somewhere 7 to 10% ownership. Don't think he's actually going to be that high given his range of outcomes. The last time they played in week 10, these two teams, he had 13 carries, 147 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We already talked about it earlier with this game having the highest total on the main slate by 4 whole points. And then The recency bias I speak on is, of course, Fields only rushing for 11 yards last week. But remember, he also got banged up, sprained ankle, polar conditions that even Josh Allen didn't do well for fantasy in. And Fields is still 196 yards shy of Lamar Jackson's single season rushing record. So if he's out there, I would imagine he's at full health, and I'd imagine they are going for it. So yes, Fields is an amazing spend up play this week.
Yeah, I mean, all of the reasons that you talked about why this game environment is great. I wrote Jared Goff down just because, I mean, it's like the quote unquote obvious play. Mm-hmm. He is the cash game quarterback, especially on DraftKings. This is a spot where at Detroit in home games for the Lions, averaging 59.4 combined points over the last 6 weeks. Detroit's first in passing EPA, 8th in passing rate over expectation. So all of the upside is going to Goff in this one. Chicago's one of those 3 teams that are bottom 10 in schedule adjusted points allowed to both quarterbacks and running backs. So there's lots of ways to attack them, but Detroit has really been letting Goff play well lately with everything they're surrounding him with. We have him as a top 3 value on both sides. He's the top value on DraftKings. And I mean, this is bringing up Jared Goff is just kind of all encompassing, saying that all of his main pass catchers and starters in this game are really good plays on the Detroit side. Even Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're getting him at I think it's on DK. I think it's an $1,800 discount to Justin Jefferson. And I don't think they're projecting that far apart. DJ Chark is cash viable in this game. DeAndre Swift has a ton of upside with his pass catching. This is a smash spot for the Lions. I know we talked about like how nervous I'm be about onslaughting it in large field stuff just because you have to be so perfect. But I think if you're playing something that's like less than 200 people in a tournament, I think you could definitely make the case that, I mean, having 4 Lions on your roster isn't crazy this week. And
you can take a stand in that Jamal Williams, of course, would be leverage off of Jared Goff in the passing game since
for sure. Yeah.
Since Jamal 2 catches in his last 8 games. It's like absurd how non-usage, how little usage he has in the passing game whatsoever. So there are ways to do that. I think one of the more interesting conversations is how and if even to stack Justin Fields if you play him as well, because people will naturally get to Cole. Yeah, and see, that's the thing. People logically get to Cole Kmet. And that makes sense because Cole Kmet is literally a touchdown or bust player. His 5 touchdowns this year came in that 3-game stretch where even in redraft leagues, we just talked about to sell him high because his usage, his volume just isn't there. He was only scoring touchdowns. That's it. So that's the way to do it, especially because it looks like Chase Claypool is out again this week. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out. Khalil Herbert returning, turned it back into a timeshare last week too. So you lose confidence in the running backs too. So yeah. I'm still toying around with it.
Is there a pass catcher that isn't St. Brown or Chark that I mean, obviously if you're playing large field stuff, you can throw any dart you want. If anybody's getting any significant steps, Zylstra's not scoring 3 again, but is there a favorite dart throw after those 2 on Detroit's pass catching side?
I honestly don't think there is. Like you can even say Zylstra, at least there was the routes run in favor over the other 2, James Mitchell and Garrett Griffin, and Brock Wright. But even then, like Zylstra was still under a route on 50% of drop back. So like it wasn't necessarily an increase for him, just a little more than the others. And then Jameson Williams, they're just being smart with him. Like maybe he catches one long one, but he continues not running around on even 20% of dropbacks now. I can't imagine they'll use him for this one because they still have the playoff chances, but they're just not increasing them, and rightfully so.
Yeah, I mean, when we have spots like this, sometimes you're just not going to find data to justify a play. But if other people are going to be onslaughting this game and you need to get unique, I mean, sometimes you just have to literally just throw a dart at whoever is on the field. So if you're playing the Millie Maker and you want to onslaught this game, I think you kind of have to do something crazy like that. Let's move on to running backs because I actually think this is one of the more interesting running back weeks because of what I said. There are a couple different salary combos this week with the Antonio Gibson being out designation. But we'll talk about that in a second. Tell me what pay down running back you like.
I do think it's a very interesting pool for running backs this week. And honestly, the way it's looking, maybe even spinning up for Christian McCaffrey is the way to barbell this thing, because we're getting a lot of running backs in the 5K range. But I'll start with the most obvious one, Tyler Algier, and maybe he loses some shine since everyone will likely go to Brian Robinson instead. And I'm hoping that's the case, because Algier now, remember, without Caleb Hundley injured previously, did not handle more than 11 touches in any game, unless it's the 3 that Cordero Patterson missed earlier this year. But now the past 2 weeks with Huntley out for the season, put on IR, and it's just become a two-headed backfield, they've not only been decreasing Cordero Patterson snaps, they're just giving Tyler Algier everything. He's been a top 12 running back in back-to-back weeks, even on DraftKings and FanDuel. He's had 17 to 22 touches in that time, season high, 61% of the team's backfield touches this past week. And the Falcons are 3-point favorites indoors. So game script necessarily stands up for him as well. We know it's David Blau under center, so we think it's going to be favorable for the Falcons, as favorable as it gets anyways. So yeah, it's everything kind of meshes well for Tyler Algier this week.
Yeah, I was ready to fire up some contrarian Cardinals pass catchers with Colt McCoy, but RIP to that idea. And I do agree that I think if we're talking about the two cheap running backs, or the two obvious cheap running backs, Algier and Robinson, I think I do like Algier more, slightly more than Robinson. They're both projecting really well right now. Robinson has that great matchup against Cleveland, but Arizona is just as bad, if not worse, than Cleveland in rush defense, overall defense, really. I put Rhamondre Stevenson, 7,600. He is popping as a top 2 value, the best value after Christian McCaffrey on both sides of 4 for 4. I don't know if he's one of my slam dunks. I don't even know if he makes it in my cash lineup, but I think it's a really interesting conversation point, and I want to talk to you about it because he did have a down game last week, but he still played 90% of the snaps. Miami's, we think about like Miami's a team you could pass on. Over the last 6 weeks, their rush EPA allowed per play is actually worse than their pass EPA per play over the last 6 weeks. But I think for cash consideration, but just as a thought exercise, a value exercise, I think cash games, at least on DraftKings, where everything's a little more strict, and this could obviously change by Sunday. I think the 2v2 is going to come down to, do you play 2 cheap running backs with Christian McCaffrey and go down to Amon-Ra and get Justin Jefferson in there with Christian McCaffrey, or do you slide in a Rhamondre or a Travis Etienne, get off one of the cheap running backs and go down to an Amon-Ra St. Brown? So I guess it's like the 2v2 would be like Brian Robinson and Justin Jefferson, or Rhamondre and Amon-Ra.
That's a good,
just from a straight value standpoint.
question.
It's really close, right?
Yeah, and I prefer the Jefferson side of it.
With the caveat being that we're assuming Jared Goff is just locked in there.
I still
prefer. We're already kind of getting a hedge on Amon-Ra points, assuming he doesn't go nuclear.
I do still prefer the Jefferson side of it because, yes, I agree. Rhamondre is an amazing play, but he's also, capable of a game like last week, given the Patriots offense. So I think he showed you his range of outcomes, thus isn't a cash game lock. Whereas at least we know Brian Robinson, barring injury, will get the touches. Like Taylor Heineke was averaging 9 yards per attempt last week. They still kept hammering Robinson on early downs against the Niners, despite the fact the Niners haven't allowed a single player to rush for 60 yards all this year. It was amazing. They still gave him 22 carries. But yes, I like Rhamondre for tournaments for sure. 15 of 18 backfield touches last week. Yeah. And then again, recency bias in that he was disgusting last week. I mean, that performance was bad. But again, all the touches, all the snaps. Damian Harris looks like he's trending towards out again. If Harris gets rolled active, we can get off them. Otherwise, I do think it's going to be a situation that goes into Sunday morning, and thus Rhamondre will be forgotten about for tournaments unless he becomes, a optimal cash game play. So I do like Rhamondre for tournaments for sure. I think that game actually has some sneaky upside in it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to end up having a pretty hard time, regardless of the Jefferson and St. Brown comparison, fading 2 sub 5,500 running backs in such good matchups. But it's a tough decision. That's why I wanted to talk about it. Let's move on to wide receiver, because I actually think that this is the expensive guy that kind of falls by the wayside this week. And I'm interested what you have to say about it, because I haven't thought too much about this game outside of the player I just talked about.
Yeah, and we know for the Dolphins that ownership or that target shares still stay condensed there. It is literally Tyreek Hill seeing 31% of the team's targets, Jalen Waddle seeing 21%, and the next closest on the team is Trent Sherfield with 9%. The targets only go to 2 players, and Tyreek Hill is getting lost in all the shuffle because it's Jalen Waddle who has that 67 and 84-yard touchdown the past 2 weeks, just exploded for a long touchdown. Meanwhile, Hill in that span has a 35% target share and leads the team in end zone targets. So like Tyreek Hill is still an amazing play whose ceiling can easily match or top Justin Jefferson's, and yet no one's talking about it. I will say also, game plans could change here, but whenever the Patriots in week 1 at least, and they had their full helping of corners, so I think no matter what, micro analysis, matchup-based analysis for this game matches well for Tyreek Hill. But in week 1, the Patriots played zone defense on 80% of their snaps against the Dolphins, and Tyreek Hill actually leads the league in yards per route run against zone coverage, 3.9 this year. And if they don't do that because they don't have healthy corners, this was another argument for Joe Burrow, which we did keep for the Discord last week because I was so high on the Bengals offense in that game. If they go with just like their top 2 cornerbacks missing again, then of course it's Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle against the Patriots' 3rd and 4th string corners. Either way, I think it's actually a great matchup here for Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, anytime you and I'm like Tyreek's not going to be single digits, so because Devontae will be, I guess if we're talking about expensive receivers, Devontae will be the cheap one, but that's I think we're kind of scratching Raiders off. Like Tyreek will probably come in like maybe around 10%, but anytime you could get that elite talent wide receiver that obviously Tyreek has as much, if not more, upside on a weekly basis as any player in the game, coming in way less owned than the guys like Jefferson and especially Amon-Ra. It's a really good spot. And I wanted to specifically talk about Justin Jefferson because he is so expensive. 9,200 FanDuel, 9,500 on DK, which is crazy high. But I do think that is a pretty good game environment for both sides, even though, Vikings on the road, it hasn't been as fruitful for fantasy. They are still can be very efficient passing game and can bring other teams up to their high pace level. And even with his high salary, we have Justin Jefferson, because of all those factors, projected as the best wide receiver value on both sides. So as I mentioned, if we're getting those 2 cheap running backs in cash games, I do think that they're you should probably be able to get Justin Jefferson if you want him instead of Amon-Ra, even though he's so much more expensive. But in tournaments, I think he's especially interesting because him and on FanDuel, he's the top value. You could fit him in with CMC basically on FanDuel, even in tournaments. On DraftKings, I don't think we're playing 2 chalk running backs together, so it's going to be hard to get Jefferson and CMC together. The interesting thing is they're both late start times. You got a late swap option with those games, and with them being similar in salary, CMC is probably going to be like in that 25% range, where Jefferson might be in that 15% range. So you're getting a little bit of a leverage salary play there from Justin Jefferson, who does lead all players in expected fantasy points over the last month. He's also record chasing, Vikings record chasing, maybe some single season record chasing. And I don't know what the hell Jair Alexander was thinking, but he called out Justin Jefferson and said his first game was a fluke. And I'm not one for narratives, but I mean, you don't call out the best receiver in the league.
And if we want to keep adding ands to this, the Vikings know they can't run the ball. Like, yes, the Packers will allow you to run. The Vikings cannot run the ball. This is 5 games in a row that Dalvin Cook has averaged 3.5 yards per carry. We talked about that on Move the Line Wednesday. And because of that, the last 3 games, Kirk Cousins has averaged 48 pass attempts per game. So we get the volume in favor of Justin Jefferson too. Like it's a week, honestly, where I even began trying to make sure I can get up to him because it just seems like a nuclear spot for him. That's my second favorite game on the entire slate.
Jair is actually one of my favorite DBs in the league. I think he's underrated, and I just like his swag. But
he also,
I don't know. It's crazy to say. Just I don't know.
He is amazing, yes, but also then you see him and his look, and you watch his film, and then you hear his voice. And I don't know if you've heard him talk, but like he's like Patrick.
Yeah, I heard him call out Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, that's of course. Yeah, like Patrick Mahomes. It's like no, like you shouldn't sound like that. That can't be real.
Yeah.
But yes, Jair Alexander
hilarious.
obviously shut down.
Yeah.
And he's about to get
we're
spiked.
Yeah, we're riding that narrative street all the way home this week. You got another one that I really like here. I actually do like this game, but haven't gone this far deep on the roster yet.
And I do think there are skinny stacking options across the board for Bucks Panthers. I think you can play Panthers defense as well. Tom Brady has 9 turnovers in his last 4 games. He's been miserable. And now we're seeing that the Bucks also are going to be missing starting linebacker Carl Nassib and then Carlton Davis, starting cornerback, both out for this game as well. So sneaky potential for skinny stacks here. I've gone as deep as maybe even toying around with some Chuba Hubbard in this game. Deontay Foreman pretty cheap across sites, despite being touchdown or bust option. But Russell Gage, I'm pretty confident in. Still being used as the team's number 3 receiver overall the past 2 weeks. That's important because in his last 3 games, the past 2 games, what I mentioned, he's actually tied with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin for the team lead in targets. 20% target share, has as many or has more red zone and end zone targets than both in that span. So very high on Russell Gage as a volume-based cheap option on both sides.
Yeah, I'm going back to that game that we talked about, Arizona and Atlanta. And there's a couple ways to save salary this week. Besides Tyler Algier, I don't know how Drake London's salary is so low after the volume he's been getting, but at 6,700 on FanDuel and 4,900 on DraftKings, after what we've seen with him from Desmond Ridder. Now I know a Ridder target isn't as good as a target from a lot of other NFL level quarterbacks, at least at this point, but 20 targets in 2 games, 35.7 target share over the past 2 weeks. That leads the league. Even though he has put up good games, Drake London has I think he had 12 and 14 or something like that. He's still popping in our expected fantasy points model that Pat James writes up every week for the DFS side of things. So basically what that's saying is he's having good games and he's getting so much work that he should be having explosion games. So this could be an explosion game for him, assuming Ridder could be, serviceable, which I think he will be this week against this defense. Arizona is one of the worst all around defenses, as we've already mentioned. So London is in a smash spot, and I don't know. His salary is just crazy low. When I saw it, I was amazed that it was that low.
I agree. Do you think he'll be over 10%, or do you think he'll get lost a little bit?
Yeah. So the weird thing about wide receiver ownership this week is I don't have crazy high projections on running backs, but I couldn't find where the wide receiver ownership is going. So right now, the cumulative wide receiver ownership on both, well, it's always low on FanDuel. It's lower than usual on DraftKings. And so guys like London are still getting a lot of the ownership. There just aren't a lot of, even though it's 13 games, there just aren't a lot of second and definitely not third pass catchers that are really getting good ownership. And I think it's kind of a function of the fact that everybody's just kind of, the only onslaught spot is Detroit, Chicago, and we don't even like Chicago's wide receivers. So guys like London, I think, are going to be really, really popular. This year more than any year, we've seen guys that we look at as 15% guys, and we take the blindfold off when lineup locks, and they're 27, 28. And I think that could be what we see with London this week.
And I do have a much larger wide receiver pool. I think there are a lot of cheap options this week, actually, if we're trying to stuff some players. So, yeah, there's no need to follow chalk around. If London comes in like that, that's a pretty good value.
Yeah, but he should make it into cash lineups. I have a lineup where Robinson, Algier, London still fits with J-Jeff and McCaffrey, I think, on DK. That always works on FanDuel. So I just don't always mention it as much. But yeah, for sure. Let's move on to tight end, because I think the obvious tight end player pool is 3 players. And then after that, I think you can really throw a lot of darts, and you have one that I think definitely fits that mold. That's going to save you salary and be really owned.
And we saw it last week that even on the opening drive, with Kylan Granson ruled out for the second time this year, And Granson has already been ruled out ahead of week 17. But on the opening drive, Jelani Woods had 3 catches. He looks like Calvin Johnson too when he's out there. It's wild how big he is compared to linebackers.
Yeah.
And he did register the Combine's highest athletic score for a tight end in history. So like we know he's a freak athlete. But for some reason, when Granson's in, they literally don't use him at all. 5% target share. But the 2 games now we've seen where he's out, he's running around on 70% of dropbacks, has a 21.8% target share, and his box score is 8 for 98 receiving yards and 3 for 43 this past week. So he is sitting here at minimum, basically on both sides as like basically a wide receiver who's running routes and getting targets. And we know he's just going to be locked into a lot of man coverage since Wink Martindale leaves everyone on an island with blitzes. So if Nick Foles gets the ball out, Nick Foles can have like 200 receiving yards. Like Jelani Woods easily can reach 80 to 100 here. So yeah, I like Jelani Woods quite a lot.
Yeah, there's been a 20-year discussion happening about what it would look like if LeBron James played in the NFL. It's Jelani Woods. That's what it would look like.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah. 6'7", 275 and a monster. That's actually a really fun call because nobody is playing any Indianapolis players this week.
Yeah, I should have. Damn it, I should have saved that for the Discord. Shouldn't have said that one.
Giants 27th in schedule, just fantasy points allowed to tight ends. If Jelani Woods scores and gets you 40 yards, you're absolutely dancing. Evan Engram 5,800, FanDuel 4,400, DraftKings at Houston. As we talked about on the top of the show, you made the case for why we should believe the Jaguars and that they will be playing to win this game and continue to hit on all cylinders, especially in their passing game that has benefited Evan Engram quite a bit with his 7 targets in 4 straight games, the number 1 tight end, I believe, over the last 3 weeks. Jacksonville's 4th in pass EPA per play in the last 6 weeks, 9th in passing rate over expectation. Houston, bottom half of the league in schedule, just fantasy points allowed to tight ends. We have Evan Engram as our top value on DraftKings, top 3 value on FanDuel. When I said earlier, I think the Jaguars will be popular. Like, I think Evan Engram will be the non-Kelsey tight end that everybody plays. I think ETN will get like moderate ownership. It's going to be lower now because the cheap running backs are going to take more than we expected. And then the pass catchers should get moderate ownership too. So no one's going to be like mega chalk, but if it is, I think it might be Engram.
Okay. That's interesting again because of where he fits on builds. I think maybe FanDuel makes a lot more sense, but I agree. I think
cheap running backs just let it. The cheap running backs make it a little bit easier. That 4,400 range is always really tricky when we don't have sub 6K running backs on the slate. But there's a lot. It's weird because like this is a really fun slate because salaries aren't wide open, but there is flexibility. There's not like an obvious build, which I like slates like that. It's fun.
And I guess I just haven't gotten there, or I haven't seen it so far because every time I start with like the cheap running backs, I go immediately up to Jefferson and Tyreek Hill, rather than like even worrying about tight ends. So maybe that's why. So yeah, that makes sense.
That's true. If you're doubling those expensive wide receivers, it's definitely different.
They're both in awesome spots.
Yeah, there's a lot of sub 3K defenses that are viable, sub like 4,100, 4,000 on FanDuel defenses that are viable, which we haven't had a lot this year. We had it last week. We have it again this week. One of the plays I think is actually a tremendous leverage spot because big home favorites, usually good defenses, scoring teams, even if the real defense isn't good.
And I cannot take full credit for this one because I was listening to Live the Stream, our good buddies JJ Zachariason and Denny Carter, and
shout out to JJ and Dennis
earlier this week, and just because I was toying around with like defenses and whatnot, and then I was looking at this game, and JJ actually pointed out on that podcast, and I had to go back and check this out, that for the last 2 months in a row, I think he had a stat that even went longer, but I know for a fact the last 2 months in a row, whoever has played the Bears has been a top 12 defense in fantasy. That's an amazing stat. So basically the same time since week 9, since they traded Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, and they have seeded like they've been one of the league's worst defenses in allowing a league high 32.5 points per game in that time. Like the volume and how poor they've been has thus allowed the opposing defense to also get there every single week. And so Lions Jamal Williams, Jared Goff stacks with Lions defense and no Bears run back. I think they're live this week.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely live. And like I have no and when we have home favorites by almost a touchdown and they're getting no ownership, like I almost don't even need to look at like stats or matchups. Like it's almost a blind play for me, because like even if the game does pace up, you get defensive fantasy scoring in games that are high scoring. Sometimes they're the catalyst for the high score, whether it be a pick six or a special team score or something like that. So I think Lions are one of the best leverage plays of the week. I don't, even if you don't play one, like you could play a skill position player with them. You're probably not going to onslaught, but you could onslaught and include the defense too. So I love the Lions as a differentiator or as a leverage play. You mentioned briefly David Blau week. The Falcons get the honor of playing against David Blau. Falcons are 3,900 on FanDuel, 2,700 on DK. David Blau has started 5 games. He's won 0 of them. He's completed 54% of his passes. He has 7 interceptions to 4 touchdowns and 5.6 yards per attempt in his 184 career starts. This could be ugly.
It probably will be ugly, even though James Conner, like against the Bucks, is still an amazing leverage play because they are just running him into the ground. Yeah,
what I mean is I don't know if there's a prop on it, but what are the chances that Blau even reaches 20 pass attempts?
Oh, I mean, if they let
if they're just getting smoked, right? That's the only way.
If they let McSorley just rear back, then I mean they'll probably still.
I guess that's a good point.
The offense doesn't change. You just find the slot receiver and throw it to him. That's literally the Kingsbury offense. And we're not even going to get Dortch, since we know Marquise Brown was limited because he used his cell phone in a meeting. That's the only reason why.
Yeah. This is the most painful, I've said it all year, Discord show this Sunday at 7:45 a.m. Eastern time, New Year's Day. I don't know what kind of shape we'll be in, but we will.
Wait, what? There. Hold on. What do we have to do? What are you telling me to
do? Our Discord show.
You did not tell me. Wait, no, 10:45.
10:45 your time, 7:45 my time.
Oh,
you got time.
You talked in Pacific.
You're living the dream over there. This is the one downside of West Coast.
Dude.
So you'll be in better shape than me, but we'll be there. We're gonna make it happen. Luckily, it's not on camera. But if you haven't signed up yet for that, it's only $14. So, I mean, what better time to sign up for the DFS plan and get access to our Discord show than on New Year's morning, us coming off of our celebrations? What can go wrong? If you don't want to sign up for $14, you can just go deposit on Underdog, 444.com/underdog. Use promo code 444 and you sign up with your new Underdog account, and that'll get you a free DFS subscription plus a 100% match up to $100. If you're listening, please rate and review on whatever platform you're listening to. If you're watching, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Don't follow any of us on Twitter this week. I want you guys to go follow 444_Josh. After 14 years of running 444 and turning it into what it is today and giving more people than you know in the industry literally life-changing jobs, Josh is stepping down from his full-time role as the product owner of 444. He still will be in a small role with us and with BetSperts Group as a consultant. But if you've ever listened to this podcast or you've even read a single article on 444, do me a favor. Go over to Josh's Twitter and give him a thank you. We couldn't have done this without him, and it's one hell of a way to send off 2022. So go thank him, because he means a lot to a lot of people, and we appreciate the hell out of him.
He's being Andrew Luck now, and he's going away. And I guarantee you, just like Luck, like he's going to be on a ship taking care of his children. Like he's going to be the type of person that when he walks away, literally walks away, and you never hear from him, which is the life you should be living.
Yeah, I think he's gonna. He's the type of guy. Whatever projects he goes after, he'll probably be able to afford some ships. So, yes. Cheers to Josh Moore. Please go give him a thank you if you've ever loved anything of 444. End of an era, but start of an exciting new chapter for all of us. So thank you, Josh. Thank you to the listeners. Happy New Year. Stay safe out there, and we will talk to you guys on Sunday morning.